Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar news update video. In this one I want to talk about the recent Dark Horse Comics new comic book day rundown stream that they did. So they actually do this every week. When they do a Turf Wars live reading, it usually takes the place of one of these. But because we had an Avatar book released this week, obviously they were going to talk about Katara and the Pirate Silver, but they had Rachel Roberts on, who's the editor on all the Avatar and Korra stuff, so she actually gave an update, more or less, on the lineup of books. And while, no, they didn't make the, announcements of new books here, they did at least communicate well and get across this is the approach going forward. So there was actually quite a good amount of new information here, which we'll get through, and I'll play the clips just so you have, I suppose, as much context as possible. So I have a few timestamps written down here, and we'll just be sort of going through the video here. I would sort of recommend, I guess, watching this video from about the, I suppose, 12-13 minute mark up until around the, half an hour-ish mark. That's basically when they talk about Avatar stuff, but we're just going to be skimming through it here. So the first bit, what they sort of lead off with, I think is probably one of the most interesting pieces. I think they come back to it a little bit later on, but I'll just let it speak for itself here.
One thing I did want to shine a little bit of a spotlight on for all of our Avatar fans is that we are moving from the canon continuations of the series, like The Promise, The Search, The Rift, etc. And we're moving into a more sandbox approach. So each book from here on out is going to be a one-shot format. Our next book in the series that we've announced is Toph Beifong's Metal Bending Academy.
Okay, so straight away, that's pretty much their first time really directly saying that, because they announced Katara and the Pirate Silver, they announced Toph Beifong's Metal Bending Academy, and it's like, okay, these are the next Avatar comics. But they never really explained if they were just extra books and we will be getting comic trilogies anyway, or if this was a approach shift. Here it is them directly confirming, no, this is a clear-cut decision that they have made to not continue The Promise to Imbalance going forward and to actually do these instead. They're calling it a switch to a Sandbox style approach, which obviously just means stories set in the Avatar universe rather than, in their mind, locking themselves into we have to follow up Imbalance, which, we'll see how that ends up playing out. I think the next thing I have skips ahead a little bit further to about 16 minutes.
But we're not really putting a fine line on that. Just it's up to the reader's imagination where it falls. The Toph book.
Okay, so that I think I came in a little late there. The idea there is that the question was where in the timeline are the one-shots set? So they started off with the Katara comic, and Rachel Roberts' response, as you could see there, was not particularly clear, and it's basically like it's up to the reader. That feels kind of weird when the book feels very directly set in a super specific and exact point. It's set between 209 and 210. That's the only place it can be set. So why not just say it? Especially when they talk about their timeline. I think in a second, they posted in the chat. Obviously, it's not a particularly great timeline, but it's on their website, so they're promoting it and stuff like that. But, interesting stuff. We'll skip ahead a little bit further here, and this is the sort of creative process, I think, is what they're talking about here.
A ton of fun just conceptualizing all of these books.
And can you talk a little bit about what the development process is like, working with Nickelodeon and the creators? I know Mike and Brian consult on a lot of these. Maybe just a little bit about how the stories are developed and how you decide on which ones you're going to tell next.
Yeah, so this is the most fun part of the entire process. For these books in particular, we all got on the phone all together. Faith, Peter, Jenny, my assistant editor, and I, Joan Hilty at Nickelodeon, and then Tim Hedrick, who is our consultant on this series. We all got on the phone together and we just had a story jam and just discussed what our most loved characters were, what story points we might want to talk about. We had a little bit of a parameter from Mike and Brian where, they said we want to explore more of this sandbox idea. And that's really where we went. And so
that's quite interesting. Just even that little bit right at the end there. Mike and Brian are the ones who have asked them with the comics to do this more sandbox, I suppose, one-shot style approach. So the approach shift, yes, I suppose Dark Horse are ultimately behind it, but it ultimately comes from Mike and Brian. That's very interesting. I wouldn't really have expected that. Now, I think the thing with that is that obviously this trilogy of one-shots, as we'll get into here, was obviously conceptualized quite a while ago, because the Guitar book is out now. The art for that, like the production on that, had to have been started at least 9 months before the book was actually released. So we're talking about, I suppose, them planning stuff for comics 9 months before now. So is that still the case? Because, I suppose what this gives us the impression is that, okay, I guess the Avatar comic format going forward is still trilogies, but now trilogies of one-shots with a theme. And I think they'll discuss that in a second. The other thing that we get here is that they specifically pointed out the creative team in terms of the story ideas here doesn't feature Mike and Brian when coming up with the stories for these one-shots. Mike and Brian said to do a sandbox approach, but she did not list Mike and Brian as being on the call with the rest of the team, but they did have Tim Hedrick. That might help to explain why some of these books don't seem to have anything particularly important in them, and we'll see, I suppose, what Mike and Brian are actually involved in. If they're choosing to sort of, put the continuation into Korra's sort of time period in a way for Avatar comics on hold, then what are they working on? Very, very interesting stuff. So then we'll skip ahead to 1730, which is actually just after this.
Settled on the theme of this trilogy, which is the awesome ladies of Avatar. So that's our ongoing theme for this series. As far as the rest of the creative process...
Okay, so there's where you get the confirmation. It is a trilogy of graphic novels here for the one-shots. So this one specifically, the theme is basically that it is a female character as the focus of the story. So Katara, Toph, and it confirms to us that the third one, there is going to be a third one-shot, is going to be focused on a female character. So that is interesting. That definitely sort of narrows things down, because I think arguably what you would say was that okay, based off the first two characters, it was probably I guess Zuko, Aang, or Sokka. But now it's kind of who else is it? You've done the two main members of Team Avatar, two female main members of Team Avatar, so it would sort of make sense if it was Suki. You have a lot of room to play with her, because even if you set the story during Avatar The Last Airbender with Suki, you have some pretty large periods of time where she's not, on screen part of the story. You could cover a story of her in the past, set before the series, showing her when she's younger. You can set a story after 104, basically just before she arrives in the Serpent's Pass back into things. And then there's the whole gap, basically, between that and her appearing in Appa's Lost Days. Then there's the gap from that into her Book 3 appearance. You've got actually quite a bit of time to work with Suki if you want to set a story there, plus covering her in the comic timeline also. Other than that, I'd say, I guess, May would be, I think, another good option to go for a more Fire Nation focused book, and we've already seen her be a little bit in the spotlight in Smoke and Shadow, and I'd like a return to that. Ty Lee, and of course Azula if they wanted to, but I get the impression that Azula is probably so heavily tied into the continuation that you almost can't do Azula unless it is a flashback series or something like that. But we'll see what they do specifically. So then we skip ahead to about 19 minutes where,
in the
let me see what
world
they
and the
talk about here.
plots through his voice. So he has been instrumental in helping us shape these one-shot stories and some other things that we may or may not have announced yet. So
So yeah, it was basically just that tease there at the end, and I think they were talking about Tim Hedrick there. So he has helped work on these one-shots plus books that may or may not have been announced. So they're teasing, and I think given the context of this, I don't think that is just a tease of the third one-shot. I do believe they're talking about other unannounced stuff, suggesting other unannounced story content. So whether that's the, I suppose, second Avatar comic one-shot trilogy, whatever way you want to call them, or they're talking about the next Korra comic, we're not entirely sure. But after that, I think we skip ahead a decent amount to 25.
I love a good connected spine art.
Basically just that we get a look at the Search Omnibus in person.
As I will mention here in a moment. This other thing that I'm very proud of is the Team Avatar Tales Lost Adventures Library Edition with this gorgeous, sumptuous Chan Chow cover. This was such a dream.
I love a
still be working.
Okay, so yeah, there's the other part of the spine.
It'll look awesome on your shelf, I promise. So, with this gorgeous, sumptuous Chan Chow cover, this was such a dream to work with them on this cover. It's beautiful. It really, I think, captures the spirit of Avatar in this great collection. And this is collecting, as I mentioned, the Lost Adventures and Team Avatar Tales, which is all anthology material, all one-shots in that kind of Sandbox area. Those two books were previously available as trade paperbacks, but now in a collected hardcover that will match the rest of the library editions in the line. And this does come with some sketchbook material and back matter that was not seen in the trade paperbacks. So check it out.
Okay, so there's basically the confirmation on that. The extras that we heard about is going to be concept art extras, I guess with some commentary on it, and yeah, that's what we're going to see. So we didn't really know that before. We knew there was extras, but we didn't know what they were. Now we know it's concept art extras, which is probably to be expected. It was, I doubt it was ever going to be like a new comic or anything like that, but you know, that's nice to know. Then we get into.
I love that cover art. Big Appa fan. So
it was so great to work with Chan on that cover. It's just so great. I could just talk about it all day. The next thing in our line is the Art of Avatar second edition. So basically, we've gone through. We've tightened up the interiors a little bit, revised a little bit. This is a brand new cover from Brian Konietzko. Thank you, Brian. It's gorgeous. This is a sketch that he actually.
So, this is where like I don't think we get a great look at the cover to suggest like what this new cover treatment is on the two editions and stuff like that. But there it is a look at it in hand, and as you can see there, she said that more went into this than just the sort of, you know, I suppose extra stuff that we know about. So I guess there's just going to be some general editing stuff done on the book overall. It'll still have the same content, but I guess the pages will just be maybe slightly organized a little bit differently and so on. Because again, like the initial book is like 10 years old, so of course they're going to do some slight switch ups, but we'll see what the actual content inside is like as we go forward. But as we go on, yeah, so they bring up the Deluxe edition.
It's just another way for fans to get their hands on this beautiful, beautiful art book. It details all three books in one, so please check that out. And I think I could tease this maybe a little bit. This is the Deluxe edition offering for the Art of Avatar second edition. This comes with a fancy soft touch slipcase, the book, and then a lithograph as well. And like I mentioned, this also has an interlocking spine. And let me pull out the image of the full spine, but I want to really shout out our designer, Sarah Terry, who just continues to knock all these books out of the park. She's worked on pretty much all of our Avatar stuff in the last 5 years. So thank you, Sarah.
Sarah's amazing.
But yeah, this is the full spine.
So there is what the all of the slipcases together. If you get the Avatar art book and all 4 of the deluxe edition Korra art books, that's what you're going to get in the end. Is this really nice image, Rava and Vatu together, and the element symbols in the corners. I think that's going to look really nice on a shelf. So I think that at least, you know, gives you like a sense of like, okay, there's something that you're building towards in your collection, and it is this, you know, giant chunk of 5 books that link together really nicely. So that's definitely cool to see. But I think that was most of what was covered here in this. So they covered a lot of the Avatar stuff. They clarified what's going on with Avatar comics right now, so we have a sense for where things are going. We know now not to really expect any sort of continuation material necessarily, in the same vein as The Promise all the way up to Imbalance, but instead to expect, I suppose, trilogy of one-shots going forward. We'll see what they do with regards to like creative teams, and that like, are we just going to immediately jump into like Faith Aaron Hicks and Peter Wortman doing another group of Avatar one-shots but with a different theme? I guess that that does open the door to some interesting things, in that they could decide to do, say, like a trilogy of one-shot comics when like the characters are younger, and depending on what characters they choose, that could actually be quite interesting. They could decide to go for kind of more minor character stuff. I think the question with this is obviously going to be like, they want to have a somewhat notable character on the cover because they don't want to risk the book not selling. That if you do really, really more minor character who maybe isn't the most popular, it could be a very interesting story, but would it sell to the, you know, general, you know, customer base? Not really sure. So are they almost locked into only a set amount of characters to use for these books? You know, I suppose time will tell as we get through a bunch of these. But the last thing to talk about is that, I suppose just after that, someone asked Rachel Roberts on Twitter, can we expect any news on the future of Korra comics this year? The answer is, hi, we're not ready to announce any details yet, but we are working on the next trilogy. I really appreciate your patience and hope it's worth the wait. Okay. So that is ultimately new news. We did not know that for sure the next Korra comic was going to be a trilogy. We now know it is a trilogy, so that's good. It doesn't say anything about the creative team, but you'd assume it probably still is Mike, and we'll see if they have a new artist or if it is Michelle Wong. I'm not really sure on that. I would like it to be Michelle Wong. I really liked her art in Runes of the Empire, but at least it's something. This is basically what they said after with the whole recent Turf Wars live reading sort of incident, I suppose you can almost call it. They effectively said the same thing. Not ready to announce any details yet, but it's coming. So I don't know what that means with regards to like how far off or not it is. But as I've talked about many times in the past, the lineup of books is very light when it comes to Korra content. Yes, there's going to be the Deluxe Korra art books, but that's really it. They definitely have Korra books that they need to announce just to fill out the lineup. I'm guessing it probably will be stuff more for later in the year than earlier in the year, but at the very least, it's good to have a sense for like where we are at this point. So overall, I actually think this news was quite helpful to sort of just set expectations properly, because we were very much in the dark prior to getting some of this information about like, well, when are they going back to the continuation? Now we know that at least for the next while they don't want to do that, which I suppose is very interesting from Mike and Brian's perspective in regards to like, why are they the ones making that decision? I don't really know. But yeah, I suppose that's basically the video. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on what we learned here. Confirmation of an approach shift with the Avatar comics to do more of a Sandbox style thing. and move away from the sort of trilogy directly advancing the canon, style books that they have been doing. We now know that the format that we have right now is apparently trilogies of one-shots that all have a theme. So right now we're on the what was it called, the Awesome Ladies of Avatar trilogy. So this confirms to us that after the Toph one-shot, we're getting another one-shot featuring a female character. So what character do you think will be featured on that? And I suppose plus any of the extra stuff that we saw with regards to, I suppose, Rachel Roberts showing off some of the other books that are going to be coming out over the next month and a bit. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.